The last thing Emily heard before the glass candle holder shattered against the wall, beside her head, was her mother screaming, "You are nothing but ungrateful trash." The sharp crash echoed through the dining room, while thunder rattled the windows outside the Texas house. Emily stood frozen beside the staircase, staring at the broken glass scattered across the floor. Her father's face burned red with anger as he pointed toward the front door. "Get out of my house," he barked. "If you refuse to help this family, then you are no daughter of mine." Across the table, Ryan leaned back in his chair, with the faintest smirk on his lips. At that moment, Emily realized the dinner invitation had never been about reconnecting. It had been a trap. Only an hour earlier, the evening had looked normal. Her mother served roast beef while pretending everything was fine. Ryan arrived late, wearing expensive clothes and bragging about his business project. But Emily noticed the tension immediately. Her father barely touched his food. Her mother kept exchanging nervous looks with Ryan. Finally, the truth exploded onto the table. Ryan's company was drowning in debt, and the family expected Emily to save him again. When she calmly asked how much money they needed, the room became silent. Ryan admitted he needed $80,000 immediately. Emily nearly laughed from disbelief. This was not the first disaster Ryan created. Every few years, he chased another fake dream, wasted more money, and expected everyone else to rescue him afterward. Emily had already helped him before, but nothing ever changed. This time she refused. The moment the word no left her mouth, the atmosphere turned poisonous. Her mother accused her of abandoning family. Ryan mocked her military career and called her selfish. Then her father admitted something that made Emily's stomach turn cold. They had secretly used her name and credit information for previous loans without permission. Her own family had committed fraud behind her back. Emily looked around the table in disbelief. Nobody seemed ashamed. They truly believed she owed them everything, simply because she had built a life. When Ryan accidentally mentioned a property Emily owned in Malibu, the room changed again. Her mother became furious that Emily had hidden her success from them. Years of jealousy and resentment exploded into hatred. The screaming grew louder until her father stood and ordered her out of the house forever. Emily quietly picked up her duffel bag and walked the door without crying. Behind her, her mother shouted one final insult, convinced she had finally broken her daughter. But they had no idea that less than 24 hours later, Emily would wake up inside her oceanfront home in Malibu. And only 3 weeks later, the same family that threw her away would stand outside her gates begging for help. If this story shocked you, subscribe now and stay tuned for the next part, because the Revenge family's secrets and reckoning are only beginning for everyone. Emily expected to feel broken when she arrived in Malibu the next morning, but the moment she stepped barefoot onto the cold concrete floor of her oceanfront house, something inside her changed. For the first time in years, there was no screaming, no criticism, and no pressure hanging over her chest. Outside the massive glass windows, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beneath the morning sunlight, silver waves crashing softly against the cliffs below her property. The silence almost felt unfamiliar. 24 hours earlier, her own parents had thrown her out like garbage. Now she stood inside a home they never imagined she could afford. She carried a cup of black coffee onto the balcony and stared across the coastline, while cold ocean wind moved through her hair. Malibu looked nothing like Texas. Back home, every room carried tension, judgment, and disappointment. Here, everything felt clean, peaceful, safe. Emily finally allowed herself to breathe deeply without waiting for another insult to follow. But as beautiful as the view looked, painful memories still followed her across every mile. While listening to the waves below, Emily began replaying her childhood in painful detail. Ryan had always been the favorite child. Their mother bragged about his smile, his confidence, and his fake business dreams to everyone at church. Meanwhile, Emily was constantly criticized for being too quiet, too independent, or too difficult. When she joined the military, her mother acted embarrassed instead of proud, because a daughter in uniform did not fit the perfect image she wanted to show the world. Emily spent years believing she was the problem, simply because she refused to depend on anyone. Her phone suddenly buzzed across the kitchen counter. Marcus. Emily answered immediately. Marcus had served beside her overseas and remained the only person who truly understood her. The second he heard her voice, he asked one question. How bad was it? Emily looked back toward the ocean, before quietly admitting that her mother had thrown a glass object at her head during dinner. Marcus went silent for several seconds, before muttering, "Your family officially crossed the line." For the first time since leaving Texas, Emily laughed softly. Later that afternoon, Emily unpacked the military uniforms and medals she had carried through years of deployments. Her mother once claimed uniforms only impressed poor people, but Emily remembered the soldiers who would risk their lives, protecting complete strangers without hesitation. Those memories mattered more than expensive clothes or fake luxury lifestyles. As sunset painted the sky orange above the Pacific, Emily finally admitted the truth to herself. Her family never hated her because she failed. They hated her because she succeeded without needing them. What Emily still did not know was that hidden loans, forged signatures, and desperate secrets were already quietly spreading through her family like gasoline before a wildfire started. Subscribe now to follow the next shocking chapter, because Emily's peaceful Malibu escape is about to collide with an even darker family betrayal nobody sees coming. Nobody in Emily's family could understand one thing. If she was really just an uneducated soldier, like they always claimed, then how did she quietly build a life worth millions, while Ryan destroyed every opportunity handed to him? That question haunted her mother constantly, but pride prevented any of them from asking the truth. The reality was far simpler and far more painful. Emily succeeded because she learned discipline, while the rest of her family worshipped appearances. On her third morning in Malibu, Emily woke before sunrise, out of habit formed through years of military service. The house remained silent except for distant waves crashing beneath the cliffs. She brewed coffee, tied her hair back, and walked into the home office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Inside that room sat the truth nobody in Texas ever cared enough to discover: stacks of real estate documents, investment reports, military contracts, and notebooks filled with handwritten financial plans covered the shelves beside her desk. Emily had not become successful overnight. She built everything piece by piece, while everyone else underestimated her. Years earlier, during overseas deployments, Emily noticed a pattern among many officers around her. The moment they received decent money, they rushed to buy expensive trucks, luxury watches, and giant houses they could barely afford. Some buried themselves in debt trying to impress strangers online. Emily quietly chose a different path. During lonely nights overseas, while others wasted time drinking or complaining, she studied real estate investing through books, podcasts, and online courses. Every extra dollar she earned went into small property investments near military bases. Her first duplex looked unimpressive, but it generated stable income. Then one property became several. Meanwhile, Ryan lived exactly the opposite way. He leased luxury cars he could not afford, posted fake success online, and constantly chased fast money through reckless business schemes. Their parents praised him endlessly because he looked successful. Emily learned an important lesson from watching him. People often reward the performance of success more than actual responsibility. That realization changed her forever. Around noon, Marcus stopped by the Malibu house carrying takeout food. He walked through the glass living room, glanced at the ocean view, and smirked. "Your mother would lose her mind if she saw this place." Emily laughed quietly before replying, "That's exactly why I never showed her." Marcus sat across from her and studied the financial papers spread across the table. "You know what scares them most?" he asked. Emily raised an eyebrow. "You built all of this alone." The room became silent after that, because both of them understood the truth. Emily's independence exposed every excuse her family ever made. As the afternoon sunlight filled the house, Emily reflected on how many years she wasted begging for approval from people who only valued appearances. Her family never cared about sacrifice, discipline, or loyalty, unless those things benefited them directly. But now everything was changing. The stronger Emily became, the more dangerous the truth became for everyone hiding behind lies. And somewhere far away in Texas, Ryan was already desperately trying to stop secrets from reaching the wrong people. If you think Emily deserves justice after everything she survived, comment the number 2 below and stay ready, because the next chapter will expose shocking fraud, betrayal, and consequences nobody in the family can escape. Emily thought the nightmare ended the moment she left Texas, but 3 weeks later, one phone call shattered the fragile peace. She finally started building in Malibu. The unknown number appeared while she returned from an early morning run along the beach. At first, she almost ignored it. Something deep in her instincts told her to answer anyway. The voice on the other side sounded calm, professional, and dangerously serious. Captain Emily Carter, the man asked. "My name is Daniel Whitmore. I'm an attorney representing Gulf Coast Community Bank regarding financial liabilities connected to your family." Emily stopped walking immediately. Ocean wind whipped across the cliffs, while her heartbeat slowed instead of racing. Years in the military trained her body to become calm whenever danger appeared. The attorney carefully explained that Ryan's business was collapsing under massive debt, but that was only the beginning. Multiple loans connected to Ryan Carter Enterprises listed Emily as a guarantor. Forged signatures carrying her name appeared across financial documents, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Emily felt her stomach tighten while staring at the crashing Pacific waves below. Her own family had continued using her identity, even after she refused to help them at dinner. This was no longer manipulation. This was criminal fraud. The attorney continued speaking in a careful tone. Ryan had allegedly falsified company revenue reports, hidden unpaid taxes, and misused investor money for personal spending. The bank was preparing legal action because the company no longer had enough assets to cover the losses. Emily closed her eyes briefly as reality settled over her like cold rain. Her parents had not only protected Ryan from consequences for years, they helped create the monster destroying everyone around him now. The second the call ended, Emily's phone exploded with incoming messages. First her mother called, then her father, then Ryan. Voicemail after voicemail flooded her screen. Emily sat alone inside the quiet kitchen while dark clouds rolled across the Malibu coastline outside the windows. Finally, she listened to the first message. Her mother sounded panicked and emotional. "Emily, sweetheart, there's been a misunderstanding with the bank," she cried. "Families help each other. Please don't abandon us over one argument." Emily almost laughed hearing those words. One argument they committed fraud, using her name, and still acted like victims. Her father's message came next, cold and demanding. "You need to stop ignoring us and cooperate like an adult," he snapped angrily. "No apology, no accountability, only pressure." Ryan's voicemail sounded the worst of all, because he still believed Emily would save him. "Look, things got complicated," he admitted calmly. "But if you help clean this up, everybody walks away fine. You've got the money." Emily deleted every voicemail without replying. That night, Emily sat alone on the floor, beside the open glass doors of her bedroom, while waves crashed violently beneath the cliffs. For the first time in her life, she understood something clearly. Her family never believed she deserved boundaries. To them, love meant unlimited access to her loyalty, finances, and emotional energy. The moment she stopped sacrificing herself for them, she became the enemy. What Emily still did not know was that Ryan's lies stretched far beyond stolen loans, and investigators were already uncovering secrets capable of destroying the entire family forever. If you think Emily should finally expose everyone involved, comment the number 3 below. Because the next chapter will reveal shocking evidence, hidden crimes, and the beginning of Ryan's collapse. Marcus knew something was wrong the second Emily walked into the cafe overlooking the Santa Monica Marina. She moved like a soldier, trying to stay composed after surviving an explosion. Calm face, controlled breathing, silent eyes carrying too much weight. He waited until she sat across from him before quietly asking, "How bad is it this time?" Emily wrapped both hands around her untouched coffee and stared through the window toward the boats rocking gently in the harbor. "Much worse than I thought," she admitted softly. Then she explained everything. The forged loans, the stolen identity, the attorney's warning, Ryan's collapsing business empire, and the terrifying realization that her own parents had willingly helped commit fraud against her. Marcus listened without interrupting once. The farther Emily spoke, the darker his expression became. By the time she finished, his jaw was tight with anger. "So your family used your name to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars," he said flatly. Emily nodded slowly. "And they still expect me to save them." Marcus leaned back in his chair and shook his head in disbelief. "That's not family anymore, Emily. That's organized manipulation." Those words hit harder than she expected, because deep down she already knew they were true. For years, Emily convinced herself that loyalty meant enduring pain quietly. Every insult from her mother, every selfish mistake Ryan made, every moment her father treated her achievements like threats instead of accomplishments. She survived all of it because part of her still hoped one day they would finally love her the way family should. But sitting across from Marcus that morning, she felt something changing inside her. The guilt that controlled her for years was beginning to crack. Marcus lowered his voice carefully. "You know what scares them most." Emily looked up slowly. "It's not the investigation. It's not the lawsuits. It's you finally refusing to rescue them." Emily remained silent because she knew he was right. Her family built an entire system around her sacrifice. Ryan created disasters because he believed Emily would always fix them. Her parents protected him because they assumed Emily would absorb the damage quietly. The moment she stepped away, the entire illusion started collapsing. Outside the cafe, gray clouds drifted across the marina while cold wind rippled the ocean water. Marcus studied Emily carefully before speaking again. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. You didn't destroy your family. You stopped allowing them to destroy you." Emily felt emotion tighten painfully in her chest because nobody had ever said those words to her before. Not once. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The sounds of dishes clattering and distant conversations filled the silence between them. Then Emily finally admitted something she never dared say aloud. "Part of me still feels guilty watching them fall apart." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's because good people feel guilt even when they're being abused." Emily looked down at her coffee while memories flooded through her mind. Her mother crying, her father shouting, Ryan smirking across the dinner table. Every painful moment suddenly looked different now. Not like proof she failed them, proof they failed her. What Emily still did not realize was that federal investigators were already closing in on Ryan faster than anyone expected, and one hidden witness was preparing to expose secrets capable of destroying every lie he ever built. Subscribe now and stay with us for the next shocking chapter, because Ryan's empire is about to collapse publicly, and Emily is finally about to discover who truly stood beside her all along. Emily almost dropped her gym bag the moment she saw the black sedan parked outside the security gate beneath her Malibu property. Early morning fog drifted across the cliffs, while waves crashed violently below, but all she could focus on was the familiar figure standing beside the car, her father. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. The ocean wind pushed against his wrinkled shirt while he stared silently toward the massive glass house above the cliffs. Emily watched the exact moment realization hit his face. This was not a vacation rental. This was not borrowed wealth. His daughter truly owned this life. The security guard near the gate stepped closer cautiously. "Sir, you cannot remain here without authorization." Emily's father barely heard him. His eyes remained locked on the property stretching behind her. The infinity pool overlooking the Pacific, the polished concrete terraces, the enormous windows glowing beneath the gray sky. Everything about the house represented a truth he never wanted to accept. Emily had succeeded without him. Worse than that, she succeeded after everything he did to break her confidence. Finally, his voice came out quieter than she expected. "This is really your house?" Emily folded her arms slowly. "Yes." Silence followed immediately, the kind of silence heavy enough to expose years of regret nobody wanted to admit aloud. Her father looked older, standing outside those gates, smaller somehow. Not physically weak, but emotionally stripped of authority. For most of Emily's life, he controlled every room he entered. Now he stood outside her property like a stranger, asking permission to enter a world he no longer understood. "You never told us," he muttered eventually. Emily looked directly into his eyes. "You never asked." That sentence hit harder than shouting ever could. Her father looked away toward the ocean for several seconds, before speaking again. "Your mother could lose the house." Emily almost laughed from disbelief. Even now, after the fraud, the manipulation, and the betrayal, he still came asking for something. No apology, no accountability, just another demand, disguised as family loyalty. "You used my identity," Emily replied calmly. "We were trying to help Ryan," her father answered immediately. "You destroyed my credit. We thought he could recover." Emily shook her head slowly, while anger settled coldly inside her chest. "You gambled with my future." Her father's jaw tightened. Families make sacrifices. Emily stepped closer to the gate and lowered her voice. Healthy families ask permission. For the first time in years, her father had no response. The waves crashed below the cliffs, while silence stretched painfully between them. Emily studied the man standing before her and remembered flashes from childhood. The father who taught her to ride a bike. The father who carried her on his shoulders during county fairs. Somewhere across the years, love inside their family transformed into transactions, expectations, and emotional debt. That realization hurt more than the screaming ever did. Her father finally spoke again, but now desperation had replaced pride. "If you don't help us, your mother loses everything." Something inside Emily settled completely in that moment. Not rage, acceptance. She met his eyes, one last time, through the gate. "She already lost me." Then Emily turned around and walked back toward the house without looking back, while the Pacific Ocean roared beneath the cliffs behind her. What Emily still did not know was that investigators were preparing search warrants connected to Ryan's company, and her father's visit to Malibu would soon become part of something much bigger than financial collapse. Subscribe now and stay with us, because the next chapter will expose hidden crimes, shocking arrests, and the moment Ryan realizes his entire world is about to fall apart forever. The entire private dining room fell silent. The second Emily walked through the restaurant doors in Houston, forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died instantly. Even the waiters seemed to sense tension spreading across the room like smoke before a fire. Emily noticed every reaction immediately. Her mother stiffened in her chair. Her father lowered his eyes toward the table. Ryan's confident smile flickered for only a second before returning again. But the biggest shock came from the relatives who barely recognized her anymore. For the first time in her life, Emily was not entering a family gathering, hoping to be accepted. She walked in looking like someone who finally understood her own worth. Warm amber lights reflected against crystal glasses, while soft jazz played quietly through hidden speakers. Emily crossed the room calmly toward her grandmother, ignoring the heavy silence surrounding her. Grandma Evelyn smiled the moment she saw her. "There she is," the older woman whispered warmly while squeezing Emily's hand. "You look peaceful." Those words hit Emily harder than expected because nobody in her family had ever described her that way before. Peaceful, not difficult, not cold, not selfish, peaceful. Emily took her seat across from Ryan, while relatives exchanged awkward glances around the table. Everyone already heard rumors about investigations, lawsuits, and financial disaster surrounding Ryan's company. Texas families spread gossip faster than storms crossed the plains. Yet nobody dared address the truth openly, at least not until dinner finally began. For the first half hour, the conversation stayed painfully polite. Small talk, forced smiles, pretending everything was normal. Emily watched her mother carefully sip wine, while avoiding eye contact. Her father looked exhausted, like a man carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. Ryan, however, still acted arrogant, despite the pressure surrounding him. Finally, halfway through dinner, he leaned back in his chair and smirked toward Emily. Guess government work finally paid off, he joked loudly, while glancing at her expensive blazer and jewelry. A few relatives laughed nervously. Emily calmly placed her wine glass down. Discipline usually does. Ryan's smile tightened immediately. The tension returned stronger than before. Emily realized something important in that moment. For years, she stayed quiet to protect family peace. But silence inside toxic families only protects the people causing harm. Ryan leaned forward again. "You act like you're better than everyone, because you bought a fancy house." Emily stared directly at him without blinking. "I never said that." "You didn't have to," he snapped back. Then he made the mistake that changed the entire night. "You just got lucky." Lucky. That word unlocked years of buried anger inside Emily. She folded her napkin carefully onto the table before answering calmly enough to terrify everyone listening. "You leased a Maserati using investor money." Ryan froze instantly. Emily continued without raising her voice. "You charged nightclub bills as business expenses. You lied about company contracts that never existed." The room went completely silent. Her mother's face lost color, while her father looked physically sick. Ryan slammed his hand against the table. You don't know what you're talking about. Emily met his eyes coldly. I know the IRS does. Nobody moved after that sentence. Nobody breathed. For the first time, the family mask cracked completely in public. Emily could finally see fear replacing Ryan's arrogance, because deep down he understood something terrifying. The lies holding his entire life together were starting to collapse. And before the night ended, someone else at that table was about to reveal a truth even more devastating than financial fraud. Ryan's face turned pale the second Emily mentioned the IRS at the dinner table. The arrogant smirk he spent years hiding behind disappeared, instantly replaced by something nobody in the family had ever seen before. Fear. Real fear. The private dining room remained completely silent, except for the faint sound of silverware shaking against crystal glasses. Emily sat perfectly calm across from him, while relatives stared between them, like witnesses trapped inside a courtroom nobody expected to enter. Her mother recovered first. Emily, stop this right now, she snapped sharply, trying to regain control before the situation exploded further. But Emily no longer looked intimidated by her voice. Years earlier, one angry sentence from her mother could ruin her entire week. Now the yelling only sounded desperate. No, Emily replied quietly. For once, let's stop pretending. The room froze again. Ryan leaned forward aggressively. You think humiliating me makes you special? Emily stared directly into his eyes. No, I think consequences exist. That sentence landed harder than screaming ever could, because everyone at the table knew the truth. Ryan had escaped consequences his entire life. Missed rent payments magically solved by their parents. Credit card debt erased before collectors could call again. Failed businesses covered up with excuses and sympathy. Meanwhile, Emily got criticized for everything. Too independent, too cold, too ambitious. Somehow the responsible child always became the problem, while the reckless one stayed protected. Then Emily's mother suddenly slammed her wine glass onto the table hard enough to rattle plates. After everything we sacrificed for you, she shouted emotionally. Emily slowly turned toward her, and something inside her finally broke open after years of silence. You didn't sacrifice for me, she said calmly enough to terrify the room. You sacrificed me. Nobody moved. Even the waiters near the doorway stopped walking. Her mother's lips parted in shock, but no words came out. Emily continued speaking before fear could stop her. You taught me my value depended on usefulness, she said steadily. You loved me when I solved problems, stayed quiet, and gave things away. Her father lowered his eyes toward the table, while relatives exchanged deeply uncomfortable glances. Emily's voice remained calm, but every sentence cut deeper than anger. The second I stopped letting this family use me, I became trash. Ryan scoffed loudly, but it sounded weak now, defensive, cornered. You're being dramatic. Emily almost laughed. No, Ryan, I'm finally being honest. The words hit the room like a bomb. Years of hidden resentment suddenly sat exposed beneath the restaurant lights where nobody could ignore it anymore. Then from the end of the table, Grandma Evelyn finally spoke. Her fragile hands rested calmly atop her cane, while her eyes locked directly onto Emily's mother. She was never the problem, the older woman said softly. The entire room went silent again, but this silence felt different. Heavier. Permanent. Because for the first time in Emily's life, nobody rushed to defend her mother or Ryan. Nobody argued. Deep down, everyone knew Grandma Evelyn was telling the truth. Emily suddenly realized something powerful while looking around the table. She no longer needed their approval to feel valuable. The fear controlling her for years had finally disappeared. What nobody at that dinner realized was that federal investigators were already preparing the next move against Ryan, and by the following week, hidden evidence would push the entire family into public humiliation. Nobody could stop. If you think Emily finally said what needed to be said, comment the number 5 below, because the next chapter will reveal shocking betrayals, devastating secrets, and the moment Ryan's world completely collapses. The news spread through Houston faster than anyone expected. By the beginning of December, Ryan Carter's company was officially under federal investigation, and every fake success story he spent years building started collapsing publicly. Investors demanded answers. Former employees contacted attorneys. Tax investigators froze accounts connected to his business. For the first time in his life, Ryan could no longer charm his way out of consequences. And while chaos swallowed her family back in Texas, Emily stood quietly beneath a cold California sky, preparing for one of the most important days of her career. The military promotion ceremony took place on a coastal base just outside Malibu. Rows of officers stood in formation while sharp ocean wind moved across the concrete parade ground. Emily adjusted her dress uniform. Calmly, though, emotion tightened inside her chest. For years, her family treated her military career like an embarrassment. Her mother once claimed uniforms only impressed poor people. Her father acted disappointed that she never became the polished corporate daughter he imagined. Yet standing there that morning, Emily finally understood something important. Everything they mocked about her became the exact reason she survived. Marcus arrived early wearing a dark suit that somehow still made him look dangerous. Aunt Diane came too carrying coffee and gossip from Texas. Even Grandma Evelyn insisted on attending despite the long trip. "I'm not missing this," she told Emily firmly, while smiling proudly. Those simple words meant more than Emily expected because genuine support always sounded quieter than manipulation. As the ceremony began, sunlight broke through gray clouds above the Pacific Ocean. Emily stepped forward when her name was called, while applause echoed across the base. A senior officer pinned her new rank onto her uniform, and for a brief second, memories flooded through her mind. Endless deployments, sleepless nights overseas, lonely holidays spent away from home. Years of sacrificing comfort to build a stable life entirely on her own. Nobody handed her success. She earned every piece of it through discipline and endurance. When the ceremony ended, a young female lieutenant approached Emily nervously near the parking lot. "Ma'am," she said softly, "hearing part of your story helped me more than you realize." Emily looked surprised. "Which part?" The lieutenant hesitated briefly before answering. "The part where you stopped begging people to value you." Those words stayed in Emily's mind long after the conversation ended, because they exposed a painful truth. Many people spend their entire lives trying to earn love from people already committed to misunderstanding them. Back in Texas, things were becoming far worse for her family. Ryan disappeared after investigators executed search warrants connected to financial fraud and tax violations. Reporters started calling relatives, asking questions. Her parents lost their house quietly after months of missed payments and legal pressure. No dramatic scene happened. No police carrying furniture into the street. Real collapse usually happens silently, piece by piece, until nothing remains. One rainy evening, Emily stood alone beside the massive windows of her Malibu home, watching waves crash violently beneath the cliffs. Instead of satisfaction, she felt something unexpected: peace. Not because her family suffered, but because she finally stopped carrying responsibility for choices that were never hers to fix. For the first time in years, she no longer felt trapped inside their chaos. What Emily still did not know was that one final phone call from her mother was coming before Christmas, and the conversation would reveal a heartbreaking truth buried beneath decades of anger control and emotional damage. Subscribe now, and stay with us, because the next chapter will bring the most emotional confrontation yet, and nothing between Emily and her family will ever be the same again. The phone rang just after midnight, while heavy rain slammed against the glass walls of Emily's Malibu house. For several seconds, she stared silently at the screen, glowing beside her on the couch. "Mom?" Emily almost ignored the call like she had ignored dozens before, but something felt different this time. The anger, the manipulation, the constant pressure that once surrounded every conversation with her mother suddenly felt distant, now, like echoes from another life. Finally, Emily answered quietly, "Hello." At first, all she heard was breathing and soft crying. Then her mother spoke in a voice so weak, Emily barely recognized it. "I heard about your promotion," she whispered. "Your father saw the pictures online." Emily looked toward the dark Pacific Ocean outside the windows while lightning flashed across the horizon. "How is he?" she asked carefully. A long silence followed. Tired, her mother admitted softly. For the first time in her life, Emily heard something unfamiliar in her mother's voice. Not control, not anger, shame. The conversation moved slowly, carefully, like two strangers walking across broken glass. Emily waited for blame or emotional manipulation, but neither came. Instead, her mother suddenly whispered words Emily once spent years desperately hoping to hear. "We should have been proud of you." The sentence hit harder than every insult ever thrown at her, because it arrived decades too late. Emily closed her eyes while painful memories rushed through her mind. Her military graduation without her parents there. Holidays spent alone during deployments. Years of being treated like a disappointment, no matter how hard she worked. "You hurt me," Emily finally said quietly. Her mother started crying harder. "I know." Emily's voice remained calm. "No, I don't think you really do." Rain crashed violently outside, while silence stretched between them again. Then her mother admitted something that changed everything Emily believed about her childhood. "Ryan always needed saving," she whispered weakly. "You never did." Emily felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly because suddenly every painful memory made sense. Strong children often receive the least care because everyone assumes they can survive alone. Over time, survival turns into loneliness, and loneliness slowly becomes identity. For the first time in years, Emily stopped seeing her mother only as a villain. She saw a damaged woman who spent her entire life chasing appearances, approval, and control because she never learned how to feel secure without them. That realization did not erase the abuse. It did not fix the betrayal. But it allowed Emily to finally stop carrying hatred inside her chest. Sometimes, healing begins the moment revenge stops feeling necessary. Before hanging up, her mother asked one final question, through tears. "Do you think we could ever start over?" Emily walked slowly toward the massive windows overlooking the stormy Pacific Ocean. Waves crashed endlessly beneath the cliffs while cold moonlight reflected across the water. After a long silence, she answered honestly, "I think we can stop hurting each other." No dramatic reconciliation followed. No perfect ending appeared. Some damage cuts too deeply for life to fully repair. But for the first time, peace felt possible. A few days later, Emily quietly paid the first month's rent for her parents' small apartment through Aunt Diane without leaving her name. She did not do it for gratitude or forgiveness. She did it because she no longer needed revenge to feel whole. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. For more emotional family stories, powerful life lessons, and unforgettable journeys of strength, healing, and survival.